Oh,
I'd like to call to order the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Alderman Art Woods.
here.
Alderman Curiali.
Here.
Alderman Messina.
Here.
Alderman Sismarski, not here. Alderman Ames.
Here.
Alderman Artie Woods.
Here.
Alderman Catalano.
I know he's here. He's
He's
just
in the
not.
back.
He'll be here in a minute. I don't think the device is at 6.
I would like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 11th, 2024. Yeah. That's my motion. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Are there any questions, comments, or corrections? If there are none, then that's approved. For report and recommendations, special events purchases and rental budget. Director Wilson, I believe you have a wonderful presentation for us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome, everybody. It's a little weird being this early in the evening, but we'll make a go of it. So you may recall that some time ago, the council had directed staff to look into whether or not it will be viable from either a staffing standpoint or a financial standpoint to acquire some of the commodity type items that we use at the Parade Fest, such as the tents, tables, generators, fencing, ice chests, things of that nature. So that's what we're going to be looking at this evening. The slideshow or the deck is going to largely mirror what was in the memo. So if you've read through the memo, the deck will largely mirror the memo in presentation style and content. Go back a little, Janelle. Okay. I think you're going the wrong way. Okay, all right, okay. Yeah, all right. All right. Yeah, so again, you've all seen this before. The purpose of special events, those various events, both seasons, create new memories, and bring a deeper connection to the city for anyone living, working, or visiting would do. And so again, this was the council's request to see if there were any possible cost savings associated with purchasing certain equipment, like I said, those commodity type items that we rent on an annual basis for the fest. And then we even, in the second half of the presentation, go into the smaller events like Sounds of Summer, tree lighting, trunk or treat, things of that nature. Again, kind of where some of this came out of was during the budget process in February. You may recall we did have that rather in-depth conversation regarding the tourism fund. And so one of the outputs of that was after we kind of been through the fest this year, had another good year of post-COVID numbers, was to try to look at this, see if we could help the tourism fund out a little bit through some cost savings methods. And again, at the time we did take advantage of some excess funding in the SURF fund, rearrange some of the transfers and whatnot to make the tourism fund, healthy this year. However, as we stated, then we could maybe do that for a couple of years, but it wasn't really going to be a specific long-term solution. So we're going to have to look at other ways to either increase revenues in the tourism fund or reduce expenses, which has the same net effect on the P&L of the tourism fund. So again, that's just why we're here tonight, is to see if there's any savings that can be derived to help the financial health of the tourism fund overall. Again, the very next page was a chart that was in the memo, which just goes through a high-level overview of the fest over the last number of years, the revenues and expenditures. We do on the far right-hand side break out the band and entertainment budget, which includes the bands, the stage, the back line, the management, whatnot. We broke that out because that's not necessarily part of the conversation tonight. Obviously, if there's questions about that topic, we'll be more than happy to entertain those, but that wasn't the focus of this specific meeting. That, again, was the tents, tables, chairs, generators, et cetera, et cetera. So we broke out that band portion just to highlight that. And then the other items, the commodity type items, we'll be going through those on subsequent slides, so you'll be able to see the costs for those broke out as we go forward. So again, this was expenditures, revenues, and then the net, and then just the, like I said, the band and stage entertainment number there. And then, like I said, on the subsequent slides, we'll go through the tents and all the other types of things. And again, this was what was in the packet, was in the memo.
So, Director Wilson, I just have a question. So the band and stage cost, is that taken away from the expenditures, or that's part of that number that's in there? Like,
Excellent question, yeah. It's embedded in that expenditure number. So, you know, the first year the expenditures was 101,000. Of that 101, 53 of that first year was the band and the stage. So the expenditure number is inclusive of the band and stage number.
okay, thank you. Alderman Currielli?
Yeah, question regarding this. It didn't come up elsewhere in the packet. The cost for the band is half the total expenditures in the beginning, but in the recent years, it's gone down to a third of the total costs. Why? What are the big costs that are new? Are they new or just gone up faster?
Director Wilson?
Yeah, sure. So in the last couple of years, we did add the security. That was about 20,000 for the security. The other items, just post-COVID, the tents are, 50 to 100% more. The generators are almost double. So it's really just everything costs more post-COVID that we're renting on an annual basis. We did see this year that some of the items were a little bit less expensive this year, and we think that has to do with the fact that we moved the fest up a month, and so there was less demand, less work for the fence company, the tent company, whatever, at the end of June versus the end of July. So we did get, perhaps a little bit of savings there. But by and large, it's really just cost appreciation that we've seen. There's nothing, aside from the security, there's nothing really different that we're doing specifically with the fest that we weren't doing pre-COVID. It's just, everything just costs more.
Thank you.
Mayor, please.
Yeah, Brad, real quick, I'm pretty sure, so this is just Prairie Fest, this doesn't include the separate concerts, right? Or
Correct.
the number, the expenditure number?
Correct, that's just the fest.
Okay, I just wanted to, I thought so, but I want to.
Thank you. Please proceed.
And so moving into the actual items. So this is, and again, this largely follows along with the memo. It's just, we had to synthesize the data a little bit to get it onto one slide. So you can see there in this year, the cost for the tents, and then what the purchase price would be, and then the bottom line is staff's recommendation for what to do with this particular item. And I believe there's a question.
I don't know if you were finished explaining that. Alderman Messina? Okay. Go ahead. He said he'll wait till the end.
I had a question on the last.
Oh,
I
okay.
can wait till the end.
Okay. As I said, so I think what we would look for, just to kind of try to stay a little bit orderly here, is to try to get some consensus on each of these items before we move on, kind of like the CIP and budget. So if there's some conversation about this item, that's great, we'll entertain it. If everybody's fine with following all the staff's recommendation, then we'll just want to get a little consensus before we move on.
Mayor, please.
Yeah, I mean, so if you buy the tents within 2 years, you'll make your money back, basically, is what we're saying here, which sounds really good, but I know I asked you guys to find out so naturally, we have to put them up and everything and store them and everything, but what is the liability? What if there's another catastrophe or something? Is it? I know before, when we had the catastrophe, we had some kind of liability. I forget the exact name that the attorney used. But does that go away? What's the deal?
Director Wilson?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to defer to Mr. Conway. I believe the exact phrase is tort, but I'll
Okay,
defer to Mr.
I
Conway.
couldn't remember the word.
Yeah, the official name for the type of liability is called tort liability. Anytime the city purchases its own property, like a tent, it accepts all the liability for that. So all the liability for the maintenance of the tent, all the liability for, any mistakes that might happen with the tent. I will say, and obviously the city has real-life experience with this, for the major, large-scale commercial tents, those come with significant liability issues. If the city were to buy it, maintain it, and erect that tent itself. Just from a liability standpoint, I would recommend that, at least as to the large-scale commercial tents, the city continue to rent, because it does come with significant liability. The other issue with that is whether the city's current insurance would provide any coverage for those tents. If the current insurance does not, insurance would need to be purchased. You're probably looking at significant increase in premiums. So those come with costs as well.
Follow-up, Mayor, please?
Yeah. So what about tables and chairs? I mean, those sit on the ground, they're not put to,
Right.
is that
My
same
concern, just
or-
from a liability standpoint, is really with the large-scale commercial tents. The smaller items, city purchases those sorts of things all the time. So really, where I'm concerned about is the liability associated with the tents.
Alderman Artie Woods?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One, do we know how much storage space these would take up when they're broken down? And do we have space available to store them?
Director Lang?
Defer to Director Lang.
Dr. Lang?
So we have adequate storage space at the Public Works facility. We have the whole mezzanine, which is pretty much dedicated to storage for special events. I don't know exactly how much all of this would take to store. It's more the transporting and have the upkeep of it that would concern me more than the ability to store it.
And then one follow-up. On each of these categories, I think the same line is used. Storing and transporting will likely result in damage. Why is it that would it likely result in damage for everything that we would buy?
Director Lang?
Yeah, you're moving things around a lot. We're using machinery, forklifts and such to move things. At certain times, you have cloth tent covers. Accidents happen. Things tend to rip or get damaged. Things get dinged, knocked. So
Likely or possibly?
possible.
Okay. I'm just curious if these are different than any other thing we would have.
Alderman Art Woods?
Thank you. First, could we go through everything? Because in my opinion, we're either going to accept the majority of this or not. It doesn't make sense. So we're just going to do like chairs and then we'll do a generator or a light. It's either going to be an accepted program. So I would prefer if we went through it quickly to see how it meshes up and does it make sense as a program as opposed to the piecemeal. And to the liability, we have the same liability, well, not the exact same, but the liability existed whether somebody else put the tent up or we put the tent up. I know that you're going to argue that there's slightly a little greater because it's our personnel doing it. I'm less worried about that. But if we could run through the whole thing and kind of get an overview of it as a program collectively to see if it makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Director Wilson?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. We do have a summary slide at the end, so that's why we're just trying to put some framework around it, but if everybody's fine with that, we can do that, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if everybody's fine, I don't want them to do it because
That's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I guess, were there any other questions on tables, tents, and chairs? Okay. Moving on to generators. Again, similar layout. Currently we rent the 5 generators, the spider boxes, panels, 11 light towers. There's the purchase price there in the middle. in the considerations and the recommendation at the bottom, which staff's recommendation will be to continue to rent, largely based on the significant capital outlay to only use some of these machines really once a year. Just, perhaps doesn't make sense. Now, we do get into the smaller generators for the, like the smaller events later, where there's a slightly different recommendation for some of the smaller equipment, but for the larger, this is really for the Prairie Fest generators we're talking here.
Okay.
Next is the fencing. Again, and real quick, the numbers that are presented in the 2024 expense, just by the name, are what we paid for this year's fest. Like I said, they do vary a little bit over the years, but this was the numbers from the invoices for the fest that we had in June.
Alderman Messina?
That's okay. We're going to wait till the end
If you have questions, I mean,
then? You got it.
do the generators?
Just so I'm clear on the steel, it's all steel, right? This fencing?
Correct. It's the
It's those that are showing, right?
so there's the chain link fence panels that would be along Wooddale Road. Those are the larger panels that block ingress from Wooddale Road.
The one enclosing the site.
The one enclosing the site,
So this is
correct.
in addition to, the two need to both be purchased.
Correct. And the one that's in the picture there is kind of what we call like
That's the
that steel cattle fencing.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
So
what you
whether
see.
either or is both, essentially, mirror what we have. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could bifurcate the two and do one or the other if you wish to do that. I mean, I think, if you, and I think that's why we broke it down. So it would be, 26,480 for the large panels and 8,000 just for the cattle fencing. So if you're like, the 8-link, the 8-foot chain link fence, that's maybe a little bit too big of a lift, but the cattle fencing,
Right.
you could do those as independent items.
Thanks.
Mayor, please, did you have a question, or?
No, no.
I thought you had your hand up.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Going on to security, I just would note that the $9,000 number in that top line is just for the equipment rental. That does not include the staff that Embassy has provided the last 2 years. That was approximately an additional $11,000 each of the last couple of years, $11,000 to $12,000. And really in the considerations, the staffing levels, I know one of the things that came out of this conversation was the PD had said the first year was that if we have our staff standing at the metal detectors and wanting people, then they couldn't be proactively going through the fest. So it would be, a bit of a strain on staffing levels with everybody tied up at the two ingress stations and not being able to go through and mingle through the crowd. So ice chest, this one kind of came up because I know 2 years ago there was it was a very close call with the ice vendor, and I think this year was better, but still not where it had been in previous years. So this is one where the recommendation from staff is to potentially look into purchasing an ice chest, because it would be used for quite a few more events other than just the Prairie Fest.
I have a question about that. So is it something with these ice chests that you can move them to different facilities? I know there's really refrigeration, Freon, whatever's in there, but like them being moved, is there a concern with that? I know things can get dinged up, but when there's, Freon and things like that, I feel like those are pretty fragile. Is that something that can be transported easily to the different locations?
To be fair, I'm not an ice chest expert, but I mean, laying ice, home ice, they deliver and pick these up once a week all summer long, so I'm sure there is some durability to them, but defer to Director Lane.
Yeah, some of them actually have the slots for the forklift built directly into them,
okay.
or otherwise they could be mounted to skids and moved easily that way.
Okay, and is this something that we can use at I know we're not talking about other events, but other than Prairie Fest, is there a real big demand for ice for other?
We use ice for the Memorial Day Parade, for all the coolers, summer events. We have coolers provided. So we use it for most events. National Night Out as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that was the overview on the Prairie Fest cost and utilization of those items. So we're kind of getting into the smaller events, or the other special events. I won't say smaller, don't be demeaning to them. So there's kind of the other events that we kind of took into consideration when we were going through that. Then you can kind of see the note there. You know, we do shop with the cop, but there's really no need for any of these types of things based on how that event is set up. Same thing with Cop on a Rooftop, that's a Dunkin' Donuts, so we don't, need fencing or anything at the Dunkin' Donuts. So that's why we're largely focusing on those top 7 items for this next section. So again, the really only event that we have that we use any significant amount of tables, tents, and chairs is the tree lighting, which is for the last couple of years been in the City Hall parking lot.
Can you go back, sorry.
No. Alderman Artie Wood?
10,864 was just for the tent, just for the tree lighting? Am I seeing that right?
Correct.
Okay. So the break even is even faster then, because the same tent could be used if we purchased one?
Would it be the same tent size, though?
We would have to go back and look and see what was quoted out on the tent size. I don't know
That's fine, just in general.
if you have that, or?
Well, I'm sure that we could, if we chose to buy the tents, we could figure out universal sizes to make it more modular, to make all the events work out. I don't have to switch over.
Seems reasonable.
Any follow-up? Okay. Yeah. Please continue.
Sure.
It's not that you just go ahead. Just move it, go ahead and slide.
No, you're good. Okay. Yeah, so for the generators for the smaller events, again, the tree lighting, the summer concerts / car series, I think there's even a generator used at National Night Out, a couple of the other smaller events. So this is one that the recommendation from staff would be to purchase a smaller generator for those special events, because it would get, used at those special events, and then probably, outside of those a little bit if one was readily available on a regular basis.
I think we're good. Continue.
Fencing, we don't use any of the same type of fencing at Prairie Fest as we do for the other special events, so there's nothing on this, and we did want to present it just to be consistent. And then the ice chest, again, it would be the same recommendation from the Prairie Fest one, which would be to look into acquiring 1 or 2 for the tree lighting and the summer concert shows. And so that's by and large the end of the slides on the different commodity type items. And so to Alderman Woods' point, this is kind of that summary page where you're looking for more conversation or some recommendation on the different tranches of items for further investigation and to possibly move forward on. Yeah, there's another slide after this, but probably like to.
Is there any questions now?
Get through this before we go to the next.
Is the other slide a matrix with all the numbers?
It is not.
Table? It is not?
No, it's not.
Is it the end?
No, it's not the end either. It's just other considerations for special events, so.
Alderman Currielli?
Does our usage of tents and tables and ice change from year to year? Are they constant?
I would say they're pretty static, pretty constant. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, okay. Yeah, just like I said, yeah, depending on the number of vendors we have at Prairie Fest, that could change that count.
If Prairie Fest got larger or smaller, would that have any impact?
So, and just, I'm making up a scenario here, you know, if we bought 10 smaller tents for vendors and Prairie Fest got smaller and we only started renting out 7, well, then we would have 3 extra tents that, we would either have extra tents or that we just wouldn't use or we could rotate them through or whatnot. But if, you know, if it grew to 13, then we would have to go acquire 3 more tents. So I think in the last couple of years, it's been fairly static. But it could scale up or down a little bit, and then depending on what we had in inventory, that obviously we'd have to acquire or just put things into a rotation.
I guess a question for Janelle, is there any plans to scale up or scale down?
Thank you for the question. I think it depends. There is a finite amount of space in any location that we host our events, whether that were to change. Currently at Prairie Fest, for our vendors who hosted, like our non-food vendors, there were a total of 12. There's really not many more we could fit into that space unless we omitted or reduced the size of our children's tent. I don't foresee that happening. I actually, in fact, see our children's activities expanding. So there's that element. I understand that we are working on a downtown park. I don't know if that's going to include Prairie Fest as a location, so I can't commit to what the space would be like there and how many tents we can have.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anything else. If you want to continue.
Yeah, I mean, go to the next slide, so there's, let's use some other questions to ponder for potential savings changes. You know, do we reduce the number of days of the fest from 4 down to 3? Eliminate Resident Appreciation Day, transition the fest back to downtown being Wooddale and Commercial. Do eliminate fireworks, return to lower cost bands, we return to selling beverages ourselves. You know, this last year, we had the VFW/Lions Club and Church Street doing it instead of city staff. And, you know, then, I don't know, maybe perhaps a slightly nuclear option, you know, do we eliminate Prairie Fest altogether and do, you know, bigger, smaller events? You know, more akin to what Addison and, you know, Bensonville are doing. I don't know that we want to include Oak Grove in that mix, but, you know, so, you know, it's kind of, do we revamp how we spend the money over the course of the summer versus a significant chunk of it all in one weekend?
Alderman Currielli?
Do we have a purpose statement for Prairie Fest? I mean, an objective, a goal, something written that says, that gives us guidelines?
Wasn't that kind of at the beginning with the special events, at the very first slide, about why we do special events? Maybe not so much Prairie Fest, but...
I was going to say, yeah, that was more more general to special events, yeah. So to your question, and I'm prepared to be told wrong, but I don't believe so. No. Yeah. Manager said no. Yeah, I don't believe so. I was going to say I don't want to fully commit because I've never seen it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I've never seen it.
Alderman Artie Woods?
Yeah, for the returning to selling beverages, it looks like for 2024 we lost less money than 2023 when the city was selling beverages. Am I reading that right?
Director Wilson?
Is there a different a reason outside from beverages that we would have lost more money if the bands were about the same price?
Yeah, so like I said, obviously, Paul, I'll defer to the mayor real quick.
Oh, Mayor, please.
we didn't do the insurance this year. There was no expense, but I mean, it was almost a wash last year though, right? I don't know. I don't remember how much we received because we were rained out. So I don't know what the difference was there, but I know that's one expense that wasn't in this one, right?
Can we go back to that slide? The one that lists the 2010 through 24?
Yeah. Yeah, so this year, back to Alderman Artie Wood's question. Yeah, so there was a decrease in the beverage revenue, which, last year was 29,000. This year was a 7,200. However, the offsets to that were we didn't have to pay Town and Country for the actual beer and supplies. The honorarium to the VFW wasn't in there as well. To the mayor's point, the insurance the last couple of years had averaged around 13,000, so we didn't do that. And then 2 years ago, so in '23, there was some money that was about 6,600 that was put into the entryway, some of the signage over the entryways that wasn't repeated this year because we purchased it the year before.
Mayor, please.
Yeah. So looking at the revenues, I mean, we were 8,000 less, but then again, I know Janelle collected more in sponsorships, but I don't recall the number between this year and the previous year that added to the revenues. I don't know if maybe you have those.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, so in '23, the sponsorship number was a little over 53,000. And this year, the sponsorship number was a little under 58,000.
Oh, 5,000.
So, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was more. Oh, that's all.
4,500 really big.
Alderman Messina.
So that's included in the revenue count?
Yes.
Correct.
No.
Yeah, so about half the revenue was sponsorships this year.
Wow.
Oh, follow-up, sorry.
Yep. So do we know of those expenses that you listed, how many of those are actually other than staff time, would change, would make an actual difference if we went down from 4 days to 3 days? Like we know the staffing costs would go down, but a tenth is a tenth is a tenth. Is it the same cost, whether it's 3 days or 4 days? Those kind of things.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, there'd probably be some incremental savings. I think we'd have to talk to the vendor, unless, I don't know, Janelle or Ellen, if you have an idea. But I mean, if, they still have to come up and set up the tent, tear down the tent, whatever, so.
Daily, or, oh, you mean, yes, for the beginning and the end?
For the fest.
The fest, right.
Yeah, so I'm sure there would be, a per diem rate that we would probably, not have to pay, so it'd go down a little bit. But the bulk of those contracts are, the labor to come set everything up and tear everything down. Like I said, there's just the daily rate to have the items on site.
Yep.
So like I said, there would be some incremental savings on some of those line items, but it's not going to be, 50% or, anything like that. But incrementally, there would be savings, but.
Primarily labor, staff labor, like city staff? Probably.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Janelle?
Oh, Director Silva. Yes.
Should we reduce by 1 day? It doesn't always include just the tents as a cost reduction. It could potentially be the reduction of several bands, which range in pricing, so that would be a significant saving as well. Thank you.
Mayor, please, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so if you're going to 3 days, the deal is the carnival. So we had the management company here, and they said at one event, I think they do 2 nights of music and 4 or 5 nights of carnival. But I remember speaking to the carnival guy, the one thing he said about this spot was he would definitely probably prefer over here by Wooddale and Commercial because you're near the residents. He says there's not much foot traffic over here is what he told me. So if that's what you're thinking, the carnival guy may not want to, because there's nobody, yeah, he's a draw, but if their kids are in more walking distance, I'm sure that, it's easier for the families also.
Alderman Artwood?
Are we saying the commercial sites more conducive to kids walking there?
But
Mayor, please.
it's closer to the homes. So when I was walking
There's
this,
not homes surrounding the junior high?
No.
well, it's more industrial. I mean, you go a few blocks, it's not as close. It's maybe 4 or 5 blocks away.
To the north? No?
You got to go to
Take the
Foster.
tape measure out, I don't think there's that much difference.
You've got to go to Foster versus across the street. I mean, from here, the residents are right there. That's what he said to me. I'm just repeating what he said.
I watch all the people file down Wooddale Road to the fest every
Oh, yeah,
year
they walk.
with their wagons, with their chairs. I don't think it's fur enough to be a significant deterrent. Certainly it could be, but yes, one side of it is commercial, but all around it on the other 2 sides, within 2 blocks is all houses.
Yeah.
Mayor, please.
Again, I just bring it up because
Yeah, no,
he brought it up to me, and we only have 1 more year on this contract, correct? It was only a 2-year contract, and if we did that route, he might not be happy, he might not want to come back, and we're back to square one. That's why I'm bringing it up, that's all.
I was there, I listened to the thing, I think the comparative was more, other places are more embedded, completely surrounded by residential. I don't think it was necessarily an indicator that the commercial site was 10 times better, because if you look at that, you know, it has really the same obstacles, crossing Irving, crossing Wooddale Road.
Mayor, please.
Yeah. So that's what the management company was talking about. I'm just telling you what the owner of the carnival said to me, just out of the blue. It's not like I asked him, he just rattled it off. That's why I'm just, if we're going to shrink it, then, you know, we want to make sure that he's going to come back.
If I could, yeah. So as we were going through the numbers, the tents and the generators, do we have the number for Alan's guys to do all the work to set all those things up? Is that embedded in those numbers?
Dr. Wilson.
So, it's going to be a great answer. I don't want to speak for Alan's guys, but, you know, I mean, I think, well, maybe I'll have Director Lang come up here. Because I think...
Yeah, we can't let them sit back there.
Yeah, I think I'll let him explain the time drain. Yeah, I think just from a practical standpoint, if they're doing it during the day, then those costs are the same as to whether or not they're setting up a tent or doing other work around the city. If they're doing it between their normal, 7 and 3:30.
Right,
I think.
the other work around the city doesn't go away, right? The water main
That's correct.
Yeah.
is still the water main, the curbs are still curbs, the grass is still the grass. Those things have to be done.
Right.
Correct.
Prairie
Right,
Fest,
so
sorry, go ahead, Alderman.
I was going to say, so as we work through this, to be fair and be cognizant of all the moving pieces, right, there's, those tent guys are out there for 2 days minimum, setting up. That's if we get it on the right the first time around. So typically, it's been a 3-day event. And how many guys do they have out there? 5, 6?
5, 6, yeah, at a time.
Guys out there. So that wipes out a large part of your staff for 3 days. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying that we need to count that.
Dr. Lang.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because Prairie Fest, as it is, takes up 2.5 weeks of our time for setup, staffing during the event, and then the cleanup afterwards. So if we're to add additional elements, we have to be mindful, you're absolutely right, that it's going to take additional staff time, and other items around the city are potentially going to be put on pause while we're having to do these additional items.
And so that's why, if I can follow through.
Yes.
That's why I'm saying let's run through this and look at it as the more big picture, what parts make sense and what parts don't make sense. And I don't know if the purchase the tent and then add city labor to that is a win for the city. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. But then does it make sense if we discount that and go, that's really, we'll call it a break even. And it's never going to be a break even because we're using you guys and that pushes everything down the road. So even if the cost, the dollars were the same, the loss is we can't get the other stuff and that gets pushed, right? So people are going to start complaining about things not getting done in a timely manner.
Director Lang?
Right, and the tents, more so than anything else for me, are not solely a cost decision. You're going to have guys that, even if they receive additional training on setting up the tents, do it once a year, as opposed to companies that solely do it. So not to belabor the point, but the liability, in my opinion, is the greatest concern for those.
So then if we check down the list, the next big cost are the lighting, the generators? Is that, would you?
Fencing?
Generators would be a huge capital outlay, correct? And for items that are only used once a year.
Mayor, please.
Yeah, honestly, a few weeks ago, Alderman Smart, because this kind of came up, he was mentioning, you know, there's groups or companies, even in town, that sell used generators at a cheap price. I mean, maybe we don't have to buy every generator we use, but like last week at the Sounds of Summer, it was pitch black out there. Maybe one light tower would have been nice out there or something. I don't know, maybe. Honestly, it was real quick. He said it. He's not here, unfortunately. Maybe that's an option. And I don't know if you were in the conversation.
I did hear him mention that.
Okay.
My only concern would be, obviously, you're buying older equipment. There's no warranties to cover it. You're at risk of, not being able to locate parts for it if you need it. But it's an option that we could certainly explore.
So let's say, rent and buy equipment. So they do sell, and they depend on which company you go to, they have fairly, a lot of the bigger companies have newer equipment. They like to cycle it out on a 3-year cycle. So you can get some pretty good equipment. Again, it just, the reduced cost from new isn't that much. They don't get cut in half. Yeah, so they're still pretty significant price-wise. It would be a savings. I don't know if that number would be probably closer to 20% savings than a 50% savings. If you had to do it, you'd have to look them up and get the numbers. But as a general rule, that's typically what it is, like for skid steers and stuff. But looking at that, so then does it make sense? I guess part of one of the questions would be, do we buy 3 or 4 of those? Because again, I was going to bring up, thank you for bringing up the lighting, I was going to bring that up because people are at the last one, because we're running longer and later towards the end of the year. It's pretty dark out there, Nobody was upset about it, but a lot of people did mention that, it'd be nice if we had some lights out there. So maybe that's one element that we look at, getting a few of those. And then the next one, as Alderman Curielli said, is fencing the next biggest?
Yes.
And what's your opinion on the fencing?
Again, I mean, we don't really utilize it for anything else throughout the year, but that's less of a concern for me for storing and setting up than tents would be. But.
And Mr. Willis, so if we did that, what's the savings? Did you look at what the cost, right? You had the cost to purchase the fencing.
Yeah. Chuck, you got the fencing slide?
It's almost 27.
The fence side.
For the chain link.
Yeah, so.
7,100
Yeah.
for the fence.
So, so if you add the let's call it 5,700 plus the 1,600 together, that was the cost this year for the fencing. So it was about 7250, 7255 was the actual cost for the fence this year. And then to purchase that, if you add those two line items together, you're looking at what, about 34.5 to add those two together. So looking at, like I said, this year was 7,200. The year before was 11,000. The year before that was 8,800. So the fencing has bounced around a little bit.
So roughly 3-year payback?
So 7,000, closer to 5, yeah, depending on which year, if you're basing it off of 20.
Well, you're probably somewhere
23.
around 8,200 based
Yeah,
on the
82,
numbers.
85.
85.
Yeah, so 4-ish.
And they're probably going to continue to go up a little bit incrementally, even if you get the
The same guys, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that one's probably,
4 years.
yeah, 4, yeah, about 4, yeah. And I
And
think I
you're
don't want to,
Okay, what do you think time-wise it would take?
Time-wise, probably an additional day setup.
I think there'd be less concerns with chain link fence and cattle fencing degrading over time, sitting at 720 versus,
Yeah, we're bound to have to replace panels periodically every few years. if
Yeah, they
get
take a lot
damaged,
of
but-
abuse, I mean.
Yeah, thinking through it, saying a day to set up, but also I have to take into consideration having to take them out of storage, load them up, bring them over, so maybe 2 to 3 days all in for the fencing.
Alderman Messina?
Can you go back to the summary slide?
the numbers or
The first one
The
that
first
had that one, yeah.
Okay,
So I guess a couple observations. One, I mean, the trending is there, right? The more we spend, this is a correlation, not a causation. Correlation. The more we spend, the more we keep losing. Okay, generalization. But what I would say is just in general, I noticed that, one, we're not taking into account that these have a shelf life of like 4 years. So this is not a one-time cost, and we're in for life, right? Like, we're gonna kind of like the SURF fund. I guess was part of what my thought was like, what's the life of the chairs, the tables, right? We're adding a whole nother element to that. So I just, more than anything, wanted to say that I think I really appreciate the recommendations that you guys made. Maybe there are a few things that we should think about purchasing, but for the most part, I think your recommendations are spot on. It's just the ROI is not there. There may be another council that comes in at some point and whacks some of these events at some point. And then really, how do we justify? So that was that. And then, just so I'm clear, can I have a follow-up with? So Brad, how would that work right now if, say we did move forward with some of this, from a budget perspective, would it move to a capital expense? Like right now, this is all operating, so I really appreciate this. What I fear is like 4 years from now, or what is that, 14 years from now, someone sits here and says, wow, 2015, if we passed everything and bought it, 2025 was amazing, we didn't spend any money, and look at the money we made. Like, how are you gonna do that? So if we're looking at this in 2050, we do a capital outlay and we buy all this crap, spend $200,000. How are we going to, us and future councils going to keep track of this?
Dr. Wilson?
yeah, sure. So to your point, yeah, we would have to work this into the budget for next year. It would, yeah, move into the capital expense realm, since we'd be purchasing all at once. It'd probably be a large enough purchase, we'd have to come up with a depreciable life and put it on our capital assets schedule and start depreciating and tracking it. And if it's something that we want to continue to do, theoretically, then we'd either put it in the STAMP or the SURF program and start kind of, doing the sinking fund, pre-funding this for when we would have to replace some of these components. That being said, we'd probably have to, and, our sheets, we have, and like, okay, this year we lost Thursday night, this year we lost Friday night, this year we lost, Saturday afternoon. So, we kind of know some of these years, like if we lost days, if we didn't lose days, the spreadsheet would be, 5 times as big if we put everything up there. So we would just have to put a footnote or notate the fact that, 2024 was the last year, theoretically, that we rented all this stuff, and now we've gone to an in-house model for all of this, which would obviously affect the numbers. So we just have to footnote it, put an asterisk, and kind of track it that way.
Follow-up?
Yeah, just one final summary, I guess I'd say, is like, yeah, for me, I think that is a big deal, right? So as we think about what we do, I just think that like the cost needs to be reduced. And I think one of the easiest way, like those considerations that you guys listed, the 3 days seems like a no-brainer as an easy way to cut costs. I have my own opinions on what the impact is of bringing in a band and beer from a random vendor, but I just think we just need to keep cutting, like cut costs. We cannot keep spending more money because this is bleeding us dry. So thank you.
Alderman Artie Woods?
The steel cattle fencing, I'm assuming we have some of that currently, right? Do we have?
We don't.
We don't. So every time we've gotten that for anything, we rent it.
Yeah, we only use it for Prairie Fest.
So my thoughts on I'm not as concerned about the 8-foot one renting versus buying, but I think the look of the cattle fencing, whether we get 700 feet or not, for any of the events would be much better. I mean, that one picture up there of the tree lighting, we had the construction horses with caution tape rigged up. That didn't look so hot at one of our big events. So, I mean, just the seamlessness of that cattle fencing, kind of fencing off where the events are going to be, I think would be good. So just my opinion on something to buy, whether we rent or buy that in the future, I think that'd be good.
Mayor, please.
Yeah, couple of questions. Going back to the fencing, we do all the snow fencing, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then, looking at the numbers, so this past year, Friday, we were shut down. The year before was it wasn't Saturday, was it? No. Did we lose the day the year before also, or?
Yeah.
I forget which day it
Yeah, because
was.
we got the insurance payment on it.
Was it the Saturday? No, we did the fireworks.
Friday, just Friday.
Oh, they were both Fridays.
Yeah, the one, last
Okay,
year, we
Friday
didn't
both.
open at all.
Okay, I'm just,
This year, we did open, but it was very low attended.
right. Okay.
So Director Wilson, are you looking for like a recommendation for each of the different categories on here, or just the overall, what you're proposing, if you've got any concerns with that? So what are you looking for from us? Direction on each individual item?
I think if the recommendation is not to do any of it, then I'd be fine with an omnibus, motion, you do all of it or none of it. But absent an omnibus motion, which I doubt would be the recommendation, we'd probably look to go through and get direction on each of the particular items.
Alderman Art Woods?
Yeah, so as I was listening to all this, I was assuming this was purchase, rent question, but creeping into that is, do we do 4 days, do we do 3 days, do we do 2 days? Do we end it? So is that part of this conversation, or?
Director Wilson?
I say it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but that's why I didn't really want to go to that last slide until we talked about this, but
And this is exactly where I wanted
to go through the whole slide until we get there. Because if we're going to say, hey, let's buy all these tents, then we're going to cut the fest down to 2 days, well, then buying tents really doesn't make sense at that point to only have it for 2 days. So I think it does change the calculus a little bit, depending on the duration and the life cycle of the fest.
And I would think, based on all the comments and feedback from Ellen, that the purchase of the tents is a non-starter, right? And that'll make the attorney happy too, and I don't have to argue with him for an hour.
Yeah,
Mr.
sorry, that's
Murmas?
just always the first thing that comes out.
Yeah,
so I'm
so
sorry.
some of the, like purchasing a couple of the lights and generators maybe is the way to go. You guys could present something in the future of what the actual costs are and bringing that forward. The fencing, I would argue, I mean, that stuff lasts almost forever. But again, it's a time for staff, and I don't know that we have the staff, and I would feel that we'd be calling for a couple more summer help people to keep the schedule moving. So that seems to be a non-starter, and maybe some of the cattle fencing is something we do want to purchase, because that could be used both at Sounds of Summer, the Christmas tree lighting, a couple other events, so that's pretty versatile and sturdy. So maybe we could look at an interim amount, not the number that we use at Prairie Fest, but a lesser number that we can use at some of the other events. So that, I don't know if that's direction, but that would be my motion to move forward, unless we're going to talk about eliminating days now.
Mr. Murmas?
Yeah, I was just going to say, touch on a couple of comments here tonight. Number one, Alderman Curiali's question, if there's a goal to Prairie Fest. I do think that's an overarching theme that maybe we need to establish, because we're kind of wandering in the dark sometimes. I think certain people may think, okay, the goal is for the residents. Other people might think the goal is to bring people in from out of town. Some people might think that the goal is to get as many people there as possible. Other people might think the goal is to make it maybe not necessarily large, but have a high-quality event for the community. There's all sorts of differing viewpoints of the fest, obviously, so we don't really have
All of the above.
Okay, all of the above. The other thing, the questions to ponder were in there because the genesis of this conversation was a request from the council stemming from the budget problems that were known last year, which is why the council requested ideas, purchasing versus renting, to try to cut into that budget deficit. And those were some questions to ponder that could also potentially cut into the budget deficit. So that's why those are out there for either consideration tonight or down the road, more likely. That's all.
Mayor Police?
Yeah, regarding Alderman Currielli's statement. So way back in 2010, it was the city had a one-night event, cost $25,000. That was before this. We went to, I don't know if the first year was a 3-day, and then we went to 4-day, or went right to 4 days. But that first year, we didn't even have a carnival because the carnival backed out at the last second. It's always been a headache, the carnival. And it was always, all right, if we can do a 4-day, I mean, Itasca supposedly, but the Lions Club and Itasca supposedly makes money, but they have the city generating the police and the public works, right? So they don't have all these expenses. Since the city's running this, we have all those expenses, right? So part of it, our goal was always to be under 25,000 or break even. And, we were close, and then, we're trying to attract more. Again, that was 14 years ago. Forget 14 years ago. What does this council want to do? That's the question. Yeah. What happened then is over.
Move forward 4 days with the objective of A, B, C, and D pointed out by
All the above.
all of the above by Mr. Murmas. There's a blend of those things, equal blend of those things to get the event, right? We can only get so big because we are only so big. We don't have a site that'll get huge, but that doesn't mean that we can't have the quality that we're getting. And if you look at these numbers, we could drill down and continue to reduce costs by getting more volunteers to do stuff. And we have to get the attendance up. Part of that would have been up had it not been weather. These numbers, if you cut it to 3 days and you get a bad day, looks even worse. And if you can continue to cut it to like 2 days, then where's the bang for the buck? The tents are going to go up because the cost of all those things are the delivery setup and then tear down and take away. The incremental difference is probably $100, $200 a tent as a daily rental fee. The same with the lights and the fencing. The fencing's getting out there, taking it, putting it up and coming back out and taking it down. So we need to find the increased value to get to reduce that loss number.
Mr. Murmas?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was part of the first Prairie Fest. It was actually my task to increase attendance at the fest, make it more than just a one-day event. And back in those days when I didn't have a gray beard, one of the secondary goals, it was actually in the strat plan at the time, was to try to break as close to even as we could. The fest was never meant to make a profit at that time. It was always put on a nice, for all the above, put on a nice event, and then try to break as close to even as we could, because it's understood we don't have unlimited funds. So that was the goal back in the day.
So it sounds to me like with whatever we're talking about tonight, all the differences of opinions and potentially the future of the duration of Prairie Fest, that making a decision on whether we buy or rent things, maybe this isn't the best time to decide that, because if we're going to change the scope in some fashion of the fest, then, as it was pointed out, we may not need X amount of, feet of fencing or certain tents or even, generators or something. So I don't know if it's appropriate to make a final decision on any of this stuff if the scope of the fest itself is going to change. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but Alderman Artwood?
Yeah, that's why I said earlier that the tents are really out. Most of the things are out except for the incremental things that we talked about, adding some generators and maybe getting a couple lights because we use them for multiple events. We're not going to try to outfit Prairie Fest, but we can bring them in to do Sounds of Summer, to do Police Night Out, to do all the other things that, the tree lighting, all the other events that we do. So those make sense because they'll get used. That's not going to be a big, huge labor burden or drain for city staff. Staff could look into the ice machines. I don't know if then they make sense or they don't make sense. If we're saying Prairie Fest isn't part of the equation, you know, and we're just looking at all the other events, then maybe the ice machine doesn't make sense. But you guys could look at those three things and come back. That was my recommendation, and that we're not moving forward with tents or fences and stuff for Prairie Fest in general has been outlined, but picking up the incremental equipment, lights and generators, a couple cattle fencing maybe, and revisiting the ice machine, see if that makes sense or not make sense.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Second.
Just going to say the same thing.
Alderman Messina?
So yeah, so we could progress. My thought was, do you have like a shopping list of things that you can put up there and we can say yay or nay? Or maybe you can go across and say, are we in favor of 5 kilowatt generators, yay or nay? And then these guys, the staff has some direction on what to come back with. We definitely know it's shorter. So like that's one action item we need to do, but is the intent tonight to also tell you if we want to reduce Prairie Fest from 4 to 3 or 4 to 2? Because those are the two action items I think are left that we're going to run out of time if we keep.
Right.
Director Wilson?
I'll defer.
Okay.
I mean, we could do that. I would just separate them.
Yeah.
That's why I pointed out those, looking at those things for the events in totality, not
Right.
just the Prairie Fest in general, getting 1 or 2 as we talked about, like, and you would come back with the pricing.
Right, versatile items that could be used for
Right.
other special events. Yeah, I think I have enough direction now that I could bring something
And
back.
then take another vote for, do we want to have 4 days, 3 days, or whatever, or if there's another thing that you want to vote on.
Director Wilson?
Yeah, and Director Lang, I think said it pretty good. I think based upon Alderman Woods' motion, I think we have some pretty good direction to move on, you know, and what not to continue to push on. So I think unless there's a want from the dais to look at something that wasn't in his motion, then we're just going to assume that everything else from the memo is going to fall off, like the tents are going to fall off. Purchasing 5 generators is going to fall off. Maybe we buy 1 or 2 light towers. So I think anything that wasn't in that motion is going to fall off.
We're still coming back.
And then, yeah, we would still come back then with a more finite list.
Correct.
Based upon this guidance. And then I think, to your point, I think any other decisions about days and I think that would be a separate motion for tonight or some point in the future, whatever it is.
Well,
yeah.
wouldn't, that would fall on the special events committee to make that, or is that part of this? Mayor, please.
So anything new, we've always brought here to the council for decision. The committee doesn't arbitrarily do whatever they want in the back.
They would make a recommendation?
They do a recommendation. Right, well, like tonight, there's really not even a recommendation, but where do we want to go with the bands for tonight? That'll be on this evening. So I don't know, I have a lot of questions.
Did we take a vote on this and then, sounds like since the committee is actually also older people, that we could also take a separate vote if there's a motion on any of the considerations. Okay, so do you want to do a roll call?
Yeah, I think do a roll call on the motion that's on.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to- Are you doing a roll call on their motion?
On what the staff is going to work on.
Right.
Okay.
Alderman Art Woods,
Yes.
Alderman Currielli,
Yes.
Alderman Messina,
Yes.
Alderman Ames,
Yes.
Alderman Artie Woods,
Yes.
Alderman Catalano.
Yes.
And that passes. Alderman Messina?
Yeah, so then I'd like to make a motion to reduce the number of fest days from 4 to 3. That would be my motion.
I'll make a motion to keep Prairie Fest 4 days.
Well, is there a second?
Do we have a second on the first motion?
And do we need a second on the?
No, you don't need it, you don't need it for the second because it's still 4 days. There's no change.
So any other questions regarding the special events purchases, rentals, and budget? Okay. Items to be considered at future meetings, there are none. Do I have a motion to
Oh,
adjourn?
wait.
Alderman, please. I'm sorry. Mayor, please.
Yeah, well, since this is finance and administration, in the future here, we're going to have to discuss sales tax. Basically, January 1st, the city's going to take another hit thanks to the state. We should discuss on how we're going to handle that. Mr. oh,
Director Wilson.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, we're talking about the grocery tax,
Yes,
so
Okay.
it could be specifically grocery tax.
right. And,
Mayor, please.
and what options do you guys can have for us?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
How can they do that? They just legislate it out?
Oh, there's more fun stuff. We'll get into it.
Magic.
Taxes aren't guaranteed.
It's magic.
Any other items to be considered at future meetings? If there are none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.